section 3.4, homework number 5 and number 6. So for these questions, we're practicing the conversions between fractions and decimals. So for example, we are given a decimal 249.1. We wanted to write it as a fraction. So what should we do? Now, there are different ways we can do. So one of the ways is you can first break it apart, because this one does have a whole number part, 249, and the decimal part, 0.1. So you could rewrite it as 249 plus 0.1. And again, 0.1 means 0.1. And the whole number just stays, but 0.1 can be written as a fraction, which is 1/10. So if you remember what we learned in chapter 1, the place value, so this is the ones place, decimal point, that's the tenths, which means 0.1 means equals 0.1 equals 1/10. And so we turn that decimal part into a fraction, 1/10. And now we can use what we learned in this section, how to add fractions. And notice 249 is actually a whole number, but any whole number can be considered as a fraction with denominator 1. So I can put it 249 over 1. And then this is turning into adding these two fractions. And we know when we add fractions, we must have the same denominator. And so we will look at the two denominators, 1 and 10, and turn them both into the same denominator. Of course, 10 will work because we can multiply 10 by 1, 1 by 10 to get the common denominator 10. And so now we're going to multiply by 10 here and the 10 there. So that's how I got 2,490, because 249 times 10. And the bottom is just going to be 1 times 10 is 10. For the other fraction, 1/10, since the denominator is already 10, we don't have to do anything. Or if you really want to do something, you would just have to multiply by 1. I mean, any number times 1 is itself. So usually you don't have to do that. You can skip that. It doesn't really change anything when you multiply numbers by 1. So now they have the same denominator, which means they have the same parts and same size parts. So we can keep the denominator. That's the size of the part, which is 1/10. And then we're going to add the numerators. 2,490 plus 1 gives us 2,491. So that's how we turn decimals to fractions. Actually, to an improper fraction. Because if you want to turn this into a mixed number, it's actually pretty easy. You keep 249, you just change 0.1 to 1/10. So it's 249 and 1/10. But if you want to turn that into, and then you can use the other way. I guess you can first do this and turn this into improper fraction by multiplying the whole number, because each whole becomes 10 parts. So 249 wholes becomes 249 times 10, this many parts, and add the 1 part. So you could also do that way. And now let's look at 6a. So in number 5, we convert a decimal to an improper fraction. So now we're going to add a fraction and a decimal. Now there are two ways you can do. So they ask us to show how to calculate the sum and how to write the answer as a fraction and a decimal. So make sure you do both of them. And so first way we could do is we can convert the decimal to a fraction. And notice that, how do we convert that? 0.75. There are different ways you can do. You could do what we just did. The 7 means 7/10. This 5 means 5/100. And then in order to add them, we have to have the common denominator. So we multiply both the top and the bottom by 10. That way we can get 70 out of 100 plus 5 out of 100, which gives us 70/100ths. And then you can reduce this down to 3/4 because 25 goes into both of them, so we can divide the numerator by 25 and denominator by the 25. Again, divide by the same number. We talked about how to simplify fractions in section 2.2 also, because it's like combining smaller parts into every 25 smaller parts become a bigger part. And so that's how we get 3 parts out of 4 parts. Okay, and so once you turn both the decimal into a fraction, we can add them because they already have the same denominator. I don't have to convert the denominators. But I think in your homework, after you convert, you have different denominators. Make sure you convert them into the same denominator. So I just kept the denominator 4, add 3 and 3 to give me 6. So 6/4, we can reduce that because 2 goes into both of them. So that can be reduced down to 3/2. That's the first way. The second way is we can turn, instead of turning a decimal into a fraction, we're going to turn fraction into a decimal. So again, this process, 3/4, you will have to do a long division, which we will talk about in chapter 6. So 4 doesn't go into 3. Well, you can say 4 goes into 3 0 times. You add decimal point and add a 0. 4 goes into 30 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. And 30 minus 28 is a 2. And then you add another 0. So you bring down that 0. 5 goes into 25 times. 4 times 5 is 20. So that's how I got 0.75 there. Now, since they're both decimals, I can add a decimal, which we already well, actually, we will talk about this in chapter. Yeah, we already talked about this in this section. So we line up the same place values, and then we just add 5 and 5, which is 10, and 7 tenths, 7 tenths plus 1 tenth, that's 15 tenths. So you carry that one. So that's how we get 1.5 there. So when you're given a fraction and decimal, we cannot add them. So we either have to convert both, either both of them have to be fractions or both of them have to be decimals.